Yeah, well, thank you for joining us. Obviously, we have friends today, not just guests. So thank you for being a part of Over a Brew. So since we've seen you, what have you been doing? What do you do in your college? Let the listeners know.
Well, you're looking at me, so I guess I'll start. Yeah, I'm Glyn, as you know. So I'm the digital teaching leader at Coleg Gwent, and I've been working really closely with Siobhan, and we've been so lucky this academic year to have had lots of beautiful hardware and technology, and that we are pushing out through our libraries.
That's cool.
With the digital lending library, and using that same idea for our virtual reality headsets as well. So we've been pushing that out, and that's been a big part of our work this academic year, as well as exploring artificial intelligence, of course, via the collaborative bid and other things. It's such a hot topic at the moment, and we're really excited about it. I think it's got so much potential. Thrilled to be here today as well, Tibi. Thanks for inviting us.
Awesome. Thanks for being here. Siobhan?
So at the moment, as Glyn mentioned, quite busy with Digital 2030 funding, configuring devices, sorting them out for the digital lending library, and then a lot of the time has been spent upskilling library staff, and then also upskilling teaching staff as well to use these sort of different devices and sort of educational technologies. And then also, as Glyn mentioned, AI, we've set up the community as well, which has been thriving. And we also spend a lot of time on our SharePoint intranet sort of advertising and showcasing the good work that all our teaching staff do as well.
That's cool. That's really cool. Richard, we only spend about 5 days a week together.
We do only spend about 5 weeks. So yeah, I feel like we could probably both answer this question. So I'll only focus on a couple of key things. So for me this year, in terms of technology enhanced learning, the focus has been really around that digital capability question for staff. How do we help them to assess their capability? How do we integrate things like AI, Welsh language and culture, sustainability into that assessment and those tools and trainings and platforms? So yeah, key focus this year was developing a tool and means for staff to undertake that going forward next year, but also in terms of sort of expanding our library services and XR integration and digital wellbeing now in terms of learning engagement and coaching going into next year. So a really broad portfolio of direct contact with learners to try and support their personalised learning experience going forward.
That's cool. It's good to hear a lot of that stuff. I feel like all I've been doing recently is just AI stuff. In meetings, people start referring to me as AI and like nodding towards me, which I don't like, by the way, but it's happening. But it's so interesting, isn't it? If you were to have this conversation a year ago, we wouldn't have talked so much of AI. A lot of what we were doing before was digital capability and XR solutions and finding new ways to bring creativity out that way. And then the AI bomb detonates and the whole conversation changes, right?
That's right.
So for us, I think really good start in my mind would be to just ask the question of how do you see it? How do you feel about it, by the way? This AI explosion happening, everyone just talking about it, dominates news cycles, dominates educational papers, JISC writes about it, our leaders talk about it. So how does it permeate at your level, and how do you see it in terms of, our approach to what we were doing before? Because I think that's the bigger conversation. So we're going to try, hopefully, and talk a bit about those things. But to start off with, how do you see this AI explosion happening in your realm of influence? What do you think?
Well, I started my teaching career right back in 1996 with a blackboard. And so my career, what an exciting, privileged time to have been in education as an educator through this time frame where we've gone from blackboard, do you remember the overhead projectors? With
barely
these lights.
I'm joking, though. I do remember them very well.
To that. And then I remember using dial-up the first time in my school, and my head teacher couldn't use his external phone because I would take the phone line to Wi-Fi, personalized devices, virtual reality. And here we are talking now about artificial intelligence, this idea of this tiny letterbox, a really simplistic interface that interacts with you, and you can have a kind of a generative conversation with.
Yeah.
It's been such an exciting time. But with all of these developments, there's been worries and concerns. I remember when YouTube first came out, there was talk about banning it. There's talk about banning all devices.
Yeah.
And of course, that debate is still alive now, I think, because there are concerns about the effects of social media and screen time, etc. So I think there's a lot to be excited about with artificial intelligence. I'm really excited to see how it will develop. But I'm keen to make sure that our approach is pragmatic, it's open-minded, but that we do critically evaluate its use as well. I think that's really important, not just to run into it, because I think companies will be selling AI in everything over the next couple of years, and it will proliferate. So I'm keen for us as educators and people involved in education to develop a critical, when I mean critical, I don't mean to criticize, but a critical eye on artificial intelligence. But it's such an exciting time.
Yeah, I agree with the excitement of it. For me, teaching and then with AI sort of developing more and more now, I think it's very important for learners as well. So it's exciting, but at the same time, having that digital literacy skills with AI for learners, I think that's sort of a big element of using AI effectively as well. And I think that's something that, along with the excitement, we need to overcome as educators, making sure that they're aware that what they put into AI, data protection and everything else. So having that sort of holistic approach to it is really important as well, I think.
Yeah, definitely. It's preparing, well, as we do in education, it's preparing learners, particularly in FE, for the workforce of the future. And AI is permeating up, every level of society at the moment. And it's imperative that our learners are prepared for that. And you're right, Glyn, isn't it? It's critically evaluating that and ensuring that as educators and educational institutions, that we're properly prepared to support them, which is a challenge because, this thing's exploded in the last 12 months. Everyone's looking to education, governments are looking to education organizations and institutions. What do we know? How are we going to share that knowledge? We're learning on the ground. Yeah, we're learning the capability of this. How do we integrate that into that learner experience? How is it going to best benefit them? So it is that critical evaluation. And I think there's a lot of mis-selling of this as well. Like you say, it's AI in everything, but is it really? In business or in education, sometimes that's just simple digital transformation or engagement under the banner of AI when it really isn't. I think AI, but I think it's incredibly exciting. It's going to be tremendously beneficial, but it's having an open mind to it as well, and not, as you say, a critical eye. Not trying to nail that down, but really looking at what are the possibilities beyond what we think we wanted to do now. It's not just improving workflow for teaching staff, but don't let it improve workflow for learners because that'll be cheating. Yeah, I think there's a sort of message there, and whether that's ethics or morals and whatever, however we wrap that, it's ensuring that there's parity in terms of engagement and access and benefit for teaching staff, but imperatively that benefit for learners.
I love that. I love the parallel you drew with new technologies and that fear factor that comes with it, and the want to ban it. And for us, I think we chatted in different circles about this. But to me, it's an issue of, does it support learning? Is learning happening with it? Is it bypassing learning? How do we support learners for that to happen? And a lot of conversations I have with teaching staff in particular are around worrying about assessments, about assignments, about essays, rather than taking it back and how does it work with learning? And I don't know if you've started anything with that. We are finding it hard to start something along the lines of, let's start with learning and worry later about assessment, because everyone is scared that I'm just going to ask it to do something. So there's a couple of things there. I don't know if you want to pick up on any of those. You don't have to. But for me, there's a couple of things. What in the world are we going to do in the near future in supporting learning, generally just looking at learning without worrying about assessment? And second, how do we support assessment? How do we change assessment so they're not such easy targets for an AI to just rewrite existing content out there into a new format? Does that make sense? Are you thinking about that as well, or is it just me?
Oh my goodness, yes. Yeah, I think the first thing, once a teacher has a go at AI, the first they go, oh my goodness, wow, that's going to save me time. And then I think it twigs. You can see the realization, oh, let's type in my assessment here. Yeah. And then it comes up with an answer that will get a learner a merit or a distinction.
That's right.
And they think, Oh. And so that is a big challenge for us. And I think it's challenging, it's disruptive.
Yeah.
But I think it's a real opportunity for us to have a look at how authentic assessment is. And I think a good litmus test for that would be to put your assessment, your prompt into ChatGPT or any large language model and see what it comes up with.
Right.
And if it is, if the results mean that learner could get a grade with that minimum effort, how authentic is it? So we've been looking at the college at looking at alternative methods for assessment. So we've been talking about authenticity, about using different modalities. So you've got this wonderful range of equipment around you here today. How could teachers use that equipment to capture more authentic types of assessment and to personalize the assessment as well, to get the learners to reflect in a generative way on what they're doing?
Yes.
That kind of reflective journal, that kind of thing is very important. Things that a large language model would not be able to produce, but are quite clearly generated by that learner and is related to the learning is what we've been looking at.
Yes.
So I think it's a positive thing because, this has been going on for a while before artificial intelligence. We've had essay mills for quite a while, haven't we?
Yeah.
So I think it goes beyond that. And what was the first question you asked there?
How do we support learning? That's what I was thinking in terms of, does AI actually help the learning process, or do we just bypass it? Are we not aware how to use it in a way that helps learning? Or is that too hard? Because that's the other bit. It kind of takes too much work to get it to learn or to be a tutor or whatever else.
I think in the very near future, I think we'll be looking at personalized learning. You've seen some of that already with some of the Khan Academy stuff. That's very exciting.
Yeah.
There's this. So I'm going to get my sort of educator's nerd hat on here.
Yeah, go for it.
There's this thing called the 2 sigma problem, which is a guy called Benjamin Bloom. Anybody who's done teacher training will have heard of Bloom's taxonomy. This idea that one-to-one tuition in maths, and particularly like going from maths to mastery, is, I think, 2 standard deviations of the mean better than if they were taught in a class environment. And that's a problem.
Yes.
That advantage that smaller groups have over a large class environment. How do you overcome that?
Yes.
Well, a personalized artificial intelligence could help you with that, with differentiated instruction. So that's a tantalizing prospect. But I think if you go to somebody, whoever it may be, if they're not all that interested in maths, and you go, chat maths bot about simultaneous equations, John. And if John's not interested in that, he's not going to engage with the AI in the first place. So I think for some people, it'd be really amazing, and I think it will bring them on. But I think there'll be a big role for the teacher in, I don't think the teacher will disappear from that equation at all.
Of course not.
So I think that's important. And I think we need to get ahead of the game when it comes to academic integrity and artificial intelligence and frame that to our learners and to our staff as well, and have open conversations about that and take a holistic approach to artificial intelligence, because that is going to be key. And when I talk about academic integrity, I'm talking about the way teachers approach things as well, to not expect Turnitin to collect and correctly identify 100% of the artificial intelligence that comes in. So it's a holistic approach to artificial intelligence I think we need to take.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's for me, the excitement will be AI integrated into other means of learning.
Yeah.
Yes.
Not just that not just a text box, not just, like you say, that letterbox of typing a prompt and expecting an answer and communicating with it that way.
Yeah.
That interface, I'd like to see change in the future. Whether that becomes an avatar, whether it becomes a 3D model, or it becomes actually talking to a virtual human. But I think the exciting part is then, if you think of like vocational education, it's very skills-based. So I think a lot of the focus has been on that, as you say, that academic integrity of writing essays. We still set the same format for assignments and assessments, and then we're fearful that AI is going to help them to cheat. Well, which part of that is broken, and how will we measure it? That intelligence, they're still ending up having to handwrite an essay for a qualification as an exam. But I think for me, the exciting part is, well, how do we integrate or how does AI integrate into those immersive learning experiences? And that sort of co-pilot to guide them with that. And if you think some of the things we've seen recently in HE, where we've got immersive spaces, digital projection, interactive medical simulations or physical simulations in that space. Some of the things, we've all looked at body swaps and some of the things it does with that and some of these other apps, but where the AI is picking up on behaviors in there, how it helps the learner. Where was your eye contact? Where was your tone of voice? Where were you looking? Things to assist the tutor, but to assist the learner. I think the real powerful part of it will be, as I say, that personalized learning, where it isn't just that sage on the side. It isn't just co-piloting, answering the questions or prompting them in terms of their learning, but maybe that whole learning path from enrollment to completion to gaining that qualification, prompting them along that journey where they need to be, study hours, what will help them at that point. You're underperforming in this particular essay or assignment. This will help you. Those key prompts on their journey and guiding them through that. I think for me that'll be the really exciting part.
Yeah,
I love these type of hypothetical, levels of digital interaction and AI, supercharging of those things. At the moment, none of that really exists, but we could see it hopefully coming over the hill in terms of its potential to happen. So for us, for example, in Cymoedd, we try to stay away from any policy to do with AI yet. We've tried to reinforce the academic integrity and malpractice practices we have already.
Yes.
And try and provide guidance for staff in terms of how we would say would be a better way to use it or a good starting point, if that makes sense.
Yes.
So at the moment, we've provided that and we've created an AI Academy type of SharePoint site. And we're putting our guidance there, and any videos or resources we create, we push there. So we're hoping to stay away from don't touch that, and to just say these are some ideas you might want to bring in. But I think there's definitely a necessity for those discussions that you were describing there, in terms of open discussions to say this is what I'm doing. How is it affecting the way learning happens in my classroom and the way I assess that learning to have taken place?
Yeah, and I'd say there that we've got this AI community, and I think it's so important that our teachers and our learners are a part of that conversation, that we're just not telling them this thing, that they're coming back to us with what they found. And, we have enthusiasts, we have people who are a bit worried about it. They're all part of that community. I think having those voices heard and having an open conversation rather than just telling them, you will do this, you will not do that.
Yeah.
Having a community in the true sense of the word, I think is going to be really important in the way we frame artificial intelligence.
Well, I know Siobhan mentioned it before. So how did you set up this community? Who's part of it? Is just Gwent community on AI, is it?
Yes, that's right. Shall I talk about that? Or I feel like I've been talking.
No, you're fine. Carry on. It's fine.
I can talk forever about this. You sure?
Yeah, crack on. I'll chip in if I need to.
All right then. Yeah, so we're lucky to have some trial licenses of Teachermatic, and we use that basically as the vehicle for this AI community. So we had 30 licenses, and we opened them up to people who wanted to, and we created a Teams channel, Teams team around that to talk about it. But we took the opportunity then to build upon that and ask them about things like what their sense about malpractice. We've got a channel about that, about prompting, effective prompting, and just an opportunity for them to air their thoughts and for us to get feedback. We're delivering a presentation at the end of term now to all of staff, so not just the teaching staff, but we put our presentation to them first for feedback on it and their thoughts on it as well. So it's really important to us that we're taking them on this journey, and doesn't feel like something that's happening to them.
Yeah.
I think having that community around you, especially when it comes to AI, because this, like what happens in AI 1 week, it changes by the next week, is so fast paced. So having that community around you where you can voice some things, get their opinions on certain tools and aspects of it as well, is really important, driving the AI agenda forward when it comes to sort of higher up as well. So having that backing behind you we found really, really useful. So, yeah.
Because we're in that sort of grey area now where there's no policy, no strict guidelines other than the sort of malpractice guidelines. And so people that aren't sure what to do about it.
Yeah.
So we're kind of trying to fill that space by encouraging people to have a go, to go back to what we said at the beginning, to critically evaluate it from their perspective as professionals, as educators, to have a look at the pros and cons of it and to very much be part of that conversation. And that's the sort of approach we've taken at Coleg Gwent. Yeah,
that's great to hear. I think it's important to have those communities and groups who share and are open, because I think initially there was a lot of staff who were probably reluctant to tell their colleagues that I've used GPT to create this.
Felt like cheating.
Yeah, well, it was, wasn't it?
Doesn't it feel like cheating now?
It does. But it's having that openness then permeates into other areas, doesn't it? You know, if as a manager or as a curriculum lead or wherever, if you're open about your enthusiasm and how you've embraced it, it kind of reassures. We're finding certainly it's reassuring other staff. Then, I could do that. I'd like to learn more about that. Or for them then to be open, I've been doing that for a while. Yeah. But then they start to share what they have been doing, as you say, those sort of either groups or communities or channels for staff to have that opportunity are vital.
Yeah.
I think it goes back to that open conversation, doesn't it? Like you said, a lot of staff before were like, oh, yeah, I've used AI, but I'm not saying I've used AI. Whereas now, staff are like, I used AI to produce this. I used AI to do this. So having that open conversation, showcasing work on how you're using it effectively now, I think that's the way forward.
Yeah, and I think more importantly, staff they're sharing things that didn't work as well.
Yeah.
Oh, I tried that. That didn't work for me. Or have you tried changing that a little bit? Or when they've gone down a rabbit hole for 3 hours and then come out. Well, it was great, but it didn't quite do what I wanted it to do. Yeah. But I guess that learning experience for them and then sharing that knowledge.
The shorter the feedback loop in this process, the better, isn't it? Because you need feedback from staff. Things change. You need to provide extra input into it. And like you said, normalizing good, healthy use of AI makes everyone at ease. And you know it is when you try something, you feel like you're on your own. You don't know what others are doing. So it takes away of that that shadow sometimes that exists there, and hopefully lets people be themselves and use it creatively. Yeah. Which to me brings me to the next bit, which is how does training communities, how does that fit with your digital capability or training type of approach? Because, for example, I don't know if Rich wants to share about this. We've taken a slightly different approach to this. It's probably not the best one necessarily, but it's different in terms of bringing it into our digital capability toolkit, if that makes sense.
Yes.
We haven't had any feedback yet because it hasn't gone to staff yet, but we want to. Do you want to share a bit about that, Rich, or what we're trying to do in terms of AI, and then maybe we can come to Glyn?
Yes, yeah. I mean, in previous years, we ran quite a successful digital capability program, formerly a 6-day, then a 5-day workshop, 11 groups a year, 10 to 15 staff per group. A lot of emphasis on, creativity, communication, well-being, but also the continued learning and that sense of CPD and community. And I think if we'd continued with that over the last academic year, of course, AI would have naturally fallen into that, as XR did, as an integrated part of the program, as something we would have been keen for staff to share. But we've kind of slightly twisted that now into an online platform that our staff will have access to as of September, sort of matched to the professional teaching or the digital professional teaching standards in Wales. So we've extended those sort of 5 key transferable skills now into 6, but integrated the Welsh language and culture, as I said at the beginning, sustainability, but AI is an intrinsic part of that. So, I'm permeating the questions. So, for example, it's 40 questions, 400 statements, 3 different levels, although staff don't know that. There's something for everyone in that. It reflects their current practices or things they might aspire to do. So, they may not now be using AI to create bilingual assignments and assessments or to mark work, but it's there as a future option. And we're hoping that then will intrigue them, will inspire them to find out more. So having gone through that process, they get a lovely, funnily enough, AI-assisted, generated, personalised report based on the framework that we've written, based on the levels that we have, but then also provisioning them with courses and resources. So a nice little bit of work with LinkedIn Learning around that, and contacts we have there about mapping, because we've, as an institution, we're going down the 365 Copilot route. So mapping those kinds of courses and resources, whether they're longer pathways or one-off videos or 30-second introductions. But so staff can pick those up then as part of their CPD and integrating that into the PDR process. So at the beginning of the year, they undertake this digital capability assessment, and then that'll form part of the discussion with their managers about their competence training that they might require. So it's more of a rounded conversation than, I need Teams training, or as we said in the past, I need whiteboard training. Then I need interactive whiteboard training, and the next year I need more interactive whiteboard training because I never actually use the interactive whiteboard. So trying to make it a naturally occurring conversation, very much focused around, as we would with learners and their independent learning and personalised learning, to the staff's personalised learning and training pathways.
Yeah, so we've tried to put AI as part of that, those question sets, linking it to different digital capabilities. We have no idea how it's going to go yet because we haven't tested it properly with staff, but from September onwards, we should have a baseline. And one of the reasons we've done that is part of the problem is you have those enthusiasts that you were talking about, Glyn.
Yeah.
And sometimes that could be its own echo chamber because those are the people who are with you. They have a similar mindset in terms of adopting technology, but we want to hear from everyone, right? So we can tailor our approach to everyone. And that's no easy feat. If anyone has ever tried to do that, really listening to everyone and tailoring that, it's not an easy thing to do. And for us, we're a smaller college than you are. So for you, yours is even a bigger task than ours is. I don't know, how did you approach it, or how do you try and bring AI into digital capability?
Yeah, so I think we made an assumption that AI, what is AI? so this whole idea to begin with, we're assuming that this sort of AI thingamabob is in the background, like Hal from 2001, whatever, who was a super complicated thing. But break it down to what simply is it? What are these large language models? How do they work?
Yeah.
So we've been doing a lot of work initially about raising awareness about that. And I think by pairing it right back to what they are and what they can do, this idea of it being a sort of predictive engine, and the hallucinations, this idea that they create these false, very plausible truths, so that our staff are aware that it's not just a magic box that will give you the answer to everything, to sort of almost start that critical conversation about the output that comes from it when they have a go. So we're encouraging staff to begin with to have a go themselves, to evaluate it, framing it from literally informing them about what it is in the first instance. So that's the initial approach we've taken, and we've taken that presentation to senior managers, to our broader management team as well. And that's been the sort of stage one, if you like, that raising awareness about the sort of the requirement now for this to become part of our malpractice policies and that kind of thing. The next phase for us now is we're encouraging everybody to have a bash at it in their context. So we're making the assumption that, yes, we know about digital and digital learning, but you are the subject experts. So how does it look from your perspective? What are the applications for it? So we're very much approaching it in that way. And towards the end of this academic year now, in the next couple of weeks, we'll be running training sessions for all staff, inviting them to create prompts, to refine those prompts. And that's something we're going to have a conversation about a little bit later, I think.
That's cool.
About how useful they are and where it's not so useful. So to help to, I guess, empower them to investigate artificial intelligence from a perspective of knowing what it is in the first instance.
I like that. It's that sort of demystifying it.
It is.
Take away the fear factor. Actually, no one knows what's inside that black box, but what is it? How does it work? What to expect, and then how can you integrate that into your teaching?
Well, I think you can identify certain characteristics of some teachers. Some teachers will be fearful of it. Yeah, and they won't want to have a go. So it's just gently nudging them to have a bash in the first instance to see what it is capable of.
Yeah.
And because it's such a simple interface, I think some of the hurdles we as sort of education technologists, or whatever you want to call us, face are overcome because it's so easy to use. You just got to type, or you can just speak into it and you're away. So for those, it's just nudging them to have a go. For those enthusiasts, it's about getting them to look at the output and to critically evaluate and not just assume it's going to be awesome all the time. So I think that's the sort of approach we've taken, yeah. So it's, but yeah, we'll see.
The last one, before we maybe finish this segment, is what are we going to do with students? Because one of our issues this year was, I'm sure part of the Wales AI GIST community as well, everyone was talking about it. And distinct problem we have as opposed to HE is the consent age, because obviously a lot of these tools have the parental consent up until the age of 18. So that's an issue. And the second one is, what do we do in terms of preparing them to use it in college? Because anecdotally, although we don't have reliable data in our college, just the stuff that came out from GISC, we don't really know how our learners are using it and what they're using it for, what tools they're using. So whether it's Snapchat version of AI or whether it's GPT, we know that some learners are using it. So for us, definitely this is the present for us, is where we are. What do we do to prepare next year learners to be a part of that healthy use of AI, exploratory as it may be, alongside our tutors? That's where we are. It's not a conundrum, but it's something to work out, I guess, for us at the moment.
Yeah, I think if you definitely, because this year and probably going into next year, is still that conversation around educating staff, as you say, demystifying it for them, engaging with them, getting them to engage. I think key is the messages we're going to give learners, which should be the same messages that we're giving staff in terms of it's beneficial, it's supportive, it's to kind of buzzword, it's that co-piloted use. But how do you get that message across to learners? Is that something we want staff to do? As in introducing it as a tool like any other they would at the beginning of their course, but we all know how busy sort of induction periods are, and if you're talking, we've got to introduce them to Moodle or Teams or Blackboard or systems and services and how they submit their assignments, as well as all the other key things that go on at the beginning of the year. So it's not going to happen quickly as of September. It's probably going to be something that happens gradually over that year. But I think key to that is educating those learners, whether that's through workshops, whether that's through drop-ins, through things like success centres, or whether that's something that engagement staff do or library staff can support organisations to undertake as part of the maybe broader tutorial. It sounds strange under tutorial, but it's a skill. Maybe integrating as part of those digital skills in the same way that we would as literacy, numeracy and comms as a digital skill within there, but making sure that they have that knowledge prior then to the conundrum of when assignments are set and when work is going to be expected, so that they're prepared and feel confident prior to that. I think that's going to be a huge challenge. And how do you roll that out? So you've got 4,000, 10,000, 15,000 learners, getting up in front of them or giving them access to resources, or how do we support that? What materials would we want to put in place? And ensuring those materials are given across the right positive message, I think, is key.
Yeah, I think it needs to be a consistent message as well. So AI, like we said, is a bit of a grey area, especially like teaching staff, like, a bit nervous about using it and what they shouldn't use it for. I think if we're putting guidance out to learners, there can't be any grey areas. So I think we need to be, with our messaging and guidance to learners, very clear and very concise with what we're saying and offering to them. So whether that be how to use AI effectively and or recommended tools or things that you shouldn't use, probably a mention about GDPR and everything else as well. But I think because it's such a grey area for us as educators, then when we're putting guidance out to learners, you need to be clear with that and be confident with what you're telling your learners. And then also we need to give staff that confidence to know what they need to tell their learners as well. But I think that message needs to be from the whole sort of college. It needs to be a college down approach. So it can't be different departments with different approaches. It needs to be definitely an institutional approach.
Yeah, and I think, and like in the past where educational technologists, for want of a better word, to try and summarize some of us across the sector, were probably a bit subversive in what we did. You know, if you were trying to get tutors to set assignments in Moodle or Teams, you'd show the learners, who would then go back to the staff and go, why aren't we doing this? Or why can't I submit my assignment? I don't think you can do that with this.
No.
You've got to, it's got to have that careful approach.
If you want consistent results from it, you do need to have that simplified approach, I think, as well. Also, you know, the more you talk to people, it's this whole, how many AI tools can you use? And I think that just confuses people as well. So it's not just finding horses for courses, but getting learners used to a particular tool anyway that hits most of the things you want it to hit.
Yeah.
For me, anyway, in my mind, you know, it fits with what you were saying as well, Siobhan. I think that's what we want to create as well, you know.
Yeah, because I think, as we did in the past, you know, having 50 flavors of online quiz. Different platforms, different applications, you know, and bouncing around those. And, you know, the three of us have covered that in a lot of detail in the past. But, and not just me narrowing it down to one tool, but a consistency.
Yes.
And a consistent tool and a consistent approach.
Yeah. I think we're naive if we think that learners don't have ChatGPT open on a separate tab when they write something.
100%.
So I think we need to acknowledge that in the first instance. I think if I was going into the next academic year as a teacher, I would probably, I would hope that my college would have something in place where there would be guidance around the use of AI. So it might be that, along with, you know, you get the photographic consent at the beginning of the year.
Yes, yeah.
You know, that some colleges have gone down the line of kind of getting a consent form around the use of AI appropriately. So I think that might be a good starting point for some colleges to have a look at least as something. JCQ brought out some really nice guidance in terms of AI use and misuse. I think probably as a teacher, I would be at the very beginning of my first assignment, I would be talking to my learners about academic integrity.
Yeah.
What that means in the age of AI, and I would probably use those posters as a reference for it, because I think at the end of the day, they're there to learn, not just to get a certificate.
That's right.
Yeah.
Although they might think a bit differently, but I don't know. But that, you know, it's about what the nature of learning is. Is learning just inputting something into ChatGPT and getting a certificate at the end? Or is it about learning something to have something in your long-term memory to use in your vocation later on? So I think that for me is a really important conversation. As Richard said there, I think incorporating it into kind of tutorial might be a good idea. I think there's something in that for sure. So I think, there are lots of sort of ideas there, including, I think, this idea of digital literacy and you know, I mean, fake news with artificial intelligence is massive, and the influence on politics and everything else. So I think it's so important that digital literacy becomes a really cornerstone of some of our digital offer to learners. I think that's super important.
Yeah, because I think a lot of, without going too far off the AI track, but obviously as part of that, a lot of the behavioural issues, or, you know, behaviours at a distance we see with learners revolve around digital. You know, and understanding that it does have an influence, and we say digital literacy, but digital well-being. You know, how they interact with each other, how they interact with these tools, what they share, how they share it. I think those are key things as well. Part of that.
Yeah.
Love it. Stick with us. We're going to take a short break. And when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about prompting, AI tools, and all of these exciting things. Let's take a break. Awesome. So now we've all exchanged our brews for quality H2O. More or less. For the second part, I thought it would be really cool to talk about what AI tools we could embrace, I guess, as colleges. Stuff you've played with on your own. If you want to mention some really cool AI tools you've been playing with, but this whole discussion in education keeps going on because I think there are startups. There are about 20 startups a week in terms of AI. So it's a never-ending list of AI tools you could try, and each of them tries to do something slightly differently or totally differently. And for a lot of people, that's quite tough to choose as to where you go. So I thought it would be a really cool idea to talk about what tools we use, and then how do we talk to them? What do we tell our staff to prompt? That being the operating word at the moment. How do we prompt? And maybe if we found some cool cool outcomes, cool responses from AI as we were doing that. So the first things first, what AI tools do you use?
Well, I'll start with the one that everybody begins with.
Go for it.
It's like when you joined Twitter back in the day. Everyone followed Stephen Fry to begin with, didn't they? So that's what I did with ChatGPT. Right?
Yes.
So ChatGPT obviously is the first, probably the trailblazer, and it's almost become a bit like, you hoover the floor instead of vacuuming the floor. You Google something. It's almost you ChatGPT something, don't you?
That's right.
And it's the first one I came across. It's the one I still use a lot. I was really pleased when they introduced the most recent version of ChatGPT. I was a bit worried that we were going to have a digital equity problem with the paid version being so much better than the standard version. But they just released the ChatGPT 4.0 or something.
That's right, the Omni.
Which is really good. So I'm pleased about that. And yeah, I'm impressed with it, I have to say. We've had the Pro version as well, because we're looking at this idea of creating GTP, is it?
GPT.
That's it, yeah, these little bots.
Yes.
So we're experimenting with that at the moment. So those are the main ones we've been using. We've been introducing staff to Bing or Copilot, as it is, the free version for most of our training events to familiarise people with it. And other than that, obviously, we've suggested to staff that the AI is already sort of infused into some of the Microsoft offering, even with the basic licenses, things like Presenter Coach, things like the editor suggestions within it, are all sort of got a type of AI embedded into them. But I would say I've been looking at that for the most part. We're doing an employability presentation on Monday, aren't we? So we're looking at introducing some prompt frameworks there. But there's this thing called Google Warm Up, which gives you interview questions, and that's really available. So that's something that we're going to introduce to our employability staff then on Monday.
Yeah.
Love it.
Something else we use as well, like Glyn mentioned, sort of infused into a lot of applications now, is Canva for Education. So we have Canva for Education at Coleg Gwent, and there's some AI tools you can use in there. So, you've got the presenter one, you've got text to image as well. So that's something that we have access to. Staff and learners also have access to.
I'm not familiar with that one. What does the presenter one do? Is that what you called it?
Yeah, you can just put a prompt in and it creates a presentation for you.
Create a presentation.
Yeah, so similar to Gamma. Yeah, another one that I use. I absolutely love Gamma. So yeah.
Cool. So presentation, image creation, apart from text based.
Yeah.
It's got Magic, it's called, isn't it? Magic in Canva.
Yeah.
Yes, it's able to generate all sorts of imagery and more beside, and it's amazing that background remove all sorts of goodies in Canva. Yeah. I have to say I'm a Canva convert. I do like the offering that it has.
I love it.
I used to be a PowerPoint now through, but I've been converted to Canva. Yeah. It's just such an amazing toolkit.
It's brilliant.
And with the AI, I think they're going about it the right way.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Nice. I think in terms of technology enhanced learning, I'm probably the most boring of the bunch. At Cymoedd, I've been quite monk-like, and I'll come on to that in a second. But obviously, we were keen to look behind most paywalls. We bought into OpenAI so that we could explore, the free and the paid version. So it's a team. I know Tibi and others have been doing a lot of work with that. Probably DALL-E as well in terms of image creation. And some of those key products. But for me, as I said, I took a view that if we were, as a Microsoft 365 institution, I deliberately sort of kept myself within that 365 context, so focused very much on Copilot and Bing, managing to, should I say this on the podcast, but managing to get hold of devices that weren't necessarily controlled by the IT department so that we could explore the other possibilities.
Yeah.
But for the purpose of then working with IT in terms of systems integration or imaging, and if we've tried things, how would that work for staff? How would that work for managers? So as a TEL team, we've had a broader view from how could it benefit our senior leadership team to benefit the teaching staff to benefit in learners. So yeah, deliberately having kept myself behind that little wall of the apps, using it within PowerPoint, Word, Outlook, as that kind of intelligent Google search engine, but set in my own context, what I wanted to find, where I wanted it from, not necessarily following a prompt framework, but generating my own thought and just getting it to kind of assist me with those things rather than out and out creation of materials or resources.
We like that solution of an embedded AI product within a platform like you have the Canva one, because that gives you scope to use it around resources you've already been creating and a way of working you've had. And it also gives you that element of security, right? Where you don't feel, where is this going? Like you said, there's that black box type of unknown. So we've stayed down the middle as well. We started looking at GPT first, like everyone else. And then we stayed with Copilot from Microsoft because of the enhanced security features it gives you.
Definitely.
And we are piloting, like Rich said, a 365 Copilot with a small group of staff so that we can see how it can enable work, in different pockets, like creating a presentation or comms, or you name it, an Excel spreadsheet, working around an Excel table, etc. So we're developing that. It's the Excel one, for example, it's still in preview. So it's okay. It's not amazing. It's okay. It does not know how to talk to qualitative data. It just does numbers, just crunches numbers very well. So we like that type of stuff because it keeps us with tried and tested type of solutions. There aren't necessarily the exact fringe of where things are happening, but we're trying to keep an eye on what GPT and other players are doing. On a side note, a fun one that we spent way too much time playing with is one that creates music, which is called Udio, like audio, but without the A.
You to this one.
And it creates 30-second bits at the time, so you can prompt it text to music is basically.
Okay.
And we have had a lot of fun. It can get a bit sketchy when you start making songs about colleagues in the same office as you.
Yeah.
But we've created, the song we have for our prompt of the week and for other stuff we created with it. So we're trying to embrace it. That's still in beta as well. So we'll see if they want to sponsor us or something with a nice premium version. But they are amazing. It's amazing to see how quickly that is developed.
Yeah.
I don't know if you tried any text to audio 6 months, 8 months ago. It was really struggling. It wasn't great at all. And now, wow, you can do so much stuff.
Yeah. I have heard.
Just wanted to cough off camera there. I can slightly down. I think it's the use of Udio. I think tipped him over.
I've heard some stories.
Yes.
There's a tool I forgot to mention, of course. Go for it. Teachermatic, which is the
Teachermatic, yes.
Yeah.
We haven't been using it because I'm not in the classroom this academic year, but I think it's a nice. I think it's powered by ChatGPT, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's basically a tile of different suggested ways of using artificial intelligence. And it seems like they've done some of the prompt work in the background.
Yes.
But what teachers have appreciated about it is this idea that some of the output isn't just text-based. So, for example, we have a colleague who's big on multiple choice questions.
Yeah.
So he has asked Teachermatic to generate ChatGPT on construction, a set amount of questions. But the output is in a format that he can upload directly to our learning management system. So he doesn't even have to cut and paste it in.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So it's that kind of thing. And I think the tiles give teachers a starting point for thinking about the type of ideas, ways of using it.
Yeah.
So I think it's a nice sort of gateway into the potential of large language models.
Nice. I like that. There's this, again, do you want, because we're going to get to prompting now, it's taking prompting away from teachers. Do we want to get them to prompt more? Or a quick solution would be to use something like that. It does it for you in the short run. I like the idea that it's connected to another platform, so its output can be imported easily, because that's another thing that's lacking, isn't it? Sometimes you create something here and getting it to another platform, it can be a real pain.
Yeah.
I like that. A few colleges, I think, are using Teachermatic around the UK. That's taken over. Cool. Well, that brings us naturally into how do we talk to AI? Ooh, that was smooth. That was really smooth.
What a segue.
How do we talk to AI? What do we use? What do you use personally? And what do you tell staff to use? Do you tell them to use anything? Do you just say, just talk to it, just chat away?
Interesting. So when you say talk, are you talking about the modality? So I tend to type in.
Oh, sorry. No, I meant not to overthink it. I meant you can type it as well or talk. Yeah. I meant talk to it in terms of just say what you're thinking.
Not you saying it, yeah.
Yeah.
So what are you prompting, in fact?
That's right.
Right. Yeah, well, interestingly though, I think sorry,
That's all. You were right all along.
but I think you can talk to it now, which is amazing.
You can.
And there are all sorts of applications for that in terms of accessibility, which is really exciting.
That's right.
And I could go off on that, but I won't. I'll try and...
No, you should, because that's a really good part of prompting, isn't it? It's how does it improve accessibility rather than just typing?
I saw this. I was doing a bit of research for a bit. I did a course recently on the Open University, and there's this blind journalist called Lucy Edwards, and she's amazing. She's on all over the socials as well, and she's been trying this Be My Eyes, which is literally she'll have her phone, and the phone will tell her what her camera can see, and she's able to interact with it and talk with it.
Yes.
And I think that's a really exciting aspect from an accessibility point of view. And you could have a full podcast on the potential for artificial intelligence in accessibility.
I think we should.
Yeah.
Visual design and learning, I think that's a really exciting field for artificial intelligence. But to go back to the way I might talk to a large language model, I try to I've learned to be really specific about it.
Okay.
So we tend to use these prompts as a framework. So I use a couple. I use one called APE, which is Action, Purpose, Expectation.
Here come the acronym.
We love an acronym at Coleg.
Yeah. So you really typed with how you frame it. You're very specific with it.
Yeah.
And the expectation side of things is really important. What you want to get out from it, and you've got to give it really tight parameters. Otherwise, you might end up with very generalized stuff or stuff that you're not happy with. But what I'm finding with them is that they tend to work really well. But the real power of these large language models, unlike Google, where you get your results and then you start again, the power is continuing that dialogue with it and refining. And that's really important. You like that bit, but don't like that. Can you refine and go back to it? And I think that's really important. But having a good solid start using a prompt framework, I think, is really useful. So action, purpose, expectation is one. And the other one I use is one called role, task, format. So you give it a role. You say, I'm a secondary school teacher, or I'm a further education teacher.
Yeah.
I'm creating a lesson plan for so-and-so. So the more specific you can be with the role, it understands and it will generate better output. That's been my experience, at least.
That's cool. Yeah. Anyone else? APE? What was the other one? RTF?
RTF.
Yeah, I tend to use the RTF one more than anything else. I think just put in there what you sort of want out of it, really.
Yeah.
Try not to get too bogged down with, obviously you need some sort of framework when you're putting it into AI, but try not to spend too much time thinking about what you're putting in the first instance, because like Glyn said, it's that back and forth that helps you refine it anyway. So yeah, that's something that I use all the time. It's
like
day to day.
Day to day. I really like that because we've done the same thing, talk to staff about different frameworks, and we think we're helping. And sometimes people just think, I just want to make a start because this whole framework
is too
complicating things in my head. And I like that approach. Sometimes you need to start slow and not think everything in the first place. Yeah. You're going to say something.
Yeah. So I think I've tried to, in my own mind, simplify things before I start. So, I like yourself, I'm not directly teaching or so in that context, but it's sort of task based. So it's the task that I'm doing at that time.
Yeah.
Whether that's summarizing a policy document so that I can follow that within a meeting, or if someone raises a point, quickly prompting something, what does that mean? In what context? As you said, as a leader within the institution, how would that impact on me in terms of further education? So being specific, but for that moment in time.
Yes.
And that's probably I haven't come across the frameworks you're mentioning, but as you're talking about, I think, well, I have done that. I've done that action and I've taken that role.
You just naturally...
It's been specific to, writing that report, creating that policy. What does that strategy look like? Bring these documents together. That extended but refined Google type search of look at that for me in the context of Digital 2030 from the Welsh Government. What's the outputs? What's the inputs? Who's that going to affect? Summarize that for me so that I've got those sort of concise, but as you say, thinking about what I want it to do.
Yeah.
And sometimes I do find the suggestions helpful because you think, okay, let's go off down that rabbit hole for 5 minutes in that context. And I hadn't thought of that. but probably haven't done so much of that, because what I've tried to then do is anything that I've created, what have I missed in relation to these policies or that government policy? What should I be looking at? What should I be including? And again, with the Copilot integration, what I like is the work option. So where we've got web and work at the top, so that I can create prompts or questions about internal college documents, resources, and find those things in the context that I need them at that moment in time. So probably with unwittingly knowing, using some frameworks, but yeah, it's very much task orientated and relevant at that moment in time.
Yeah. That's another one you can spend too much time with in terms of with the work version. If you do a / you can then tag in files or people or so sometimes I would ask questions, who is Richard Fullylove? And it will try and create this picture of the person based on your interaction with them. So you would have a picture, not a name. It would tell you who they are.
As handsome the individual is, it doesn't matter.
But yeah, it's a really cool one. With our staff, we've tried to develop our own framework because there's so many out there, again, and keeping it simple enough, and even to say to staff, look, this is what we say, use this as a guide, but you don't have to use it all the time. It depends, like you were saying there, Rich, where's your starting point as well? Because sometimes I might not know what I want to do.
Yeah.
I might not have any previous examples of it. I might not have done this before. Or it's exactly the opposite, and I've done that before, and I've got examples of it. So ours is meant to have, what your setup is, what your setting is, and that could involve role, context, background, expectations, like you said with the other one. What the action is, what you're asking it to do. And again, you can go, we use a funnel type of analogy of think then how wide or how narrow you want to be with that action. And then in terms of format, do you want it to just give you whatever format it decides, or do you want it to create a certain format? And the last one, which I think a lot of these models are missing, are examples. And I don't know if you've played a lot with that. I've played a little bit and I've had good results and some very poor results as well. But it's really useful sometimes to give the AI examples of what you want it to say or reason or copy in terms of style or role, etc. And sometimes it does a fantastic job of learning from that little bit of text you've given it. And like you said, keeping context or answering within context, but with examples. And if it's a repetitive thing that or even a tangential thing, something you've done before, it's a cool thing, but it's hit and miss. It's not always great. Maybe I'm prompting it.
I've never thought about doing it, like giving an example and saying, do it like this.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a really good way of thinking about it as well, yeah.
I think it has a lot of applications in terms of feedback, particularly if you look on the teacher side, or if you're writing whatever type of text you keep writing every few months, whether it's a referral or whatever it might be. I think that type of stuff is cool because you'll keep your own way of reasoning and expression. So that's a cool one. So we in Coleg, we've started this thing called Prompt of the Week.
Nice.
Cue the song.
I was going to say, you've got a little jingle.
No, we do have a jingle, which I will not sing.
You're like, go on.
No,
give us a jingle.
No, we're not doing that.
I hope they'll overlay that over this so in post-production of this podcast.
So with that one, we try to bring a creative idea of a prompt and a response. So if you have one in the bag and you want to share it with everyone, do share it. We're going to share it with our college, and obviously we'll make it available to you as well. To everyone who's listening, do you have a cool prompt you've tried? Did you create something cool with GPT, Canva, AI, whatever it might be? What did you use, Rich? Copilot?
Copilot.
Yeah.
Where?
If any of them are cool enough.
Yeah. Sorry, you put us on the spot.
You're thinking it's some level.
What's
anything
cool?
That's cool to you? It's relative, right? It's a relative thing.
In the early days, of using it, I saw this really cool idea on Twitter. No, not Twitter. What do you call it?
X. Yes.
This really cool idea of role playing with having a dialogue with it in the style of
yes.
So I really like that idea. So I had a chat with Winston Churchill and William Shakespeare. So the prompts I used was literally, I want you to behave and talk and react as if you were this person at this stage in their life. And I had to talk to you as if I was interviewing you for a podcast, for example.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really cool. And I could see applications for that in teaching and learning as well. But
Definitely.
that was in the early stages when I was experimenting with it. But most of my prompts these days, I have to say, really quite boring, productivity-based ones.
So good productivity-based one. That would be a cool one. People would use that.
Yeah, I think things like summarizing documents, really useful thing for me. Particularly if they got, and if I'm doing a bit of research and that document happens to be online, to give me a potted summary of it.
Love it.
Those kind of things, like a TLDR, too long, did not read, giving me the kind of summary of that, I think is a really useful thing. I think that's probably one of the most useful things.
Love that.
Short term.
Short term, yeah.
I love that. I think for probably something similar, but looking at this from two sides, in terms of reporting or generating content for a report. If, say, for example, I've asked a colleague or a member of staff to pass me some bullet points in terms of activity that's taking place, and you get some nice, concise bullet points, and I think, well, I want to expand on that. I think, well, how would I rewrite that? So then asking it to maybe rewrite that in the context of what was the benefit to staff, what was the benefit to learner, how it supported tutorial, how engagement was improved. So setting the parameters, maybe the output that I'm thinking of, and just asking it to rewrite that one bullet point into maybe 2 or 3 sentences and expand on what was written. Have to go back every now and again and just clean that up, or I didn't quite mean that, I meant this, but certainly as that sort of that process to help in terms of generating that, but also the flip side, like I say, that summary, generate what was that activity, concise, 3 concise bullet points that reflects the core of this outcome, how it benefited. So you've got more of a concise, so it's taking it up or taking it down, I think, in terms of maybe there's just quick reports and feedback to staff.
I just saw another one there.
Oh, go for it.
So my wife happens to work at the college as well, and she was planning some training. Training for this summer term now, and she was working with a colleague, and she thought, how can we capture this? And so she set it up, her Word document, and it was transcribing what she was saying, her and a colleague. So that transcription then was dumped straight into Word, and then she used AI to summarize that and pull out the main points.
Love it.
And then to develop a training plan from that. I just thought that was a really useful workflow that really captures the potential for AI just to save you about 2 hours of planning time. I think that kind of thing is exactly where AI will really benefit at this moment in time.
I wish I had that when I was in uni and I had to transcribe focus group discussions. Like, nightmare.
I'm going to save you loads of time.
Yeah.
What you got for us, Siobhan?
I use it day to day for everything, really. That's basically what I use. I've used it recently, probably to ask for money. So for funding for certain things, like, subscriptions and what else. So it's like, I want to go to this person and ask for money for this. How should I approach it?
Okay.
Yeah. Again, some ideas back and forth, using it for that quite a lot. That's probably the most recent one.
I think bids.
Right.
It's just easier sometimes to have something and then take it apart.
Yes.
Adapt it than it is to start from scratch. Even if it's generic, you take the word, because AI loves the word delve.
Yes, I read that article.
Delve.
If you take delve out of it and some of the other sort of commonly used things and make it more slightly more natural in the language, it's far more easier to start with something than it is to kind of.
I actually love that idea, because I think, we talk about how could you integrate that into teaching and employability skills for learners, but you're not just using it for teaching, you're using it in the context of a business.
Yeah.
So how do I write that bid? How do I write that awkward email? How do I deal with that situation? Things that they might then go on to do in the workplace, in employment. Yeah. So that's quite interesting. How could you integrate, it's not skill, is it, or prompting, but actually examples of how they do it. I mean, one fun thing, I lost myself in a rabbit hole about 2 weeks ago in half term, giving a presentation next week on just a lightning talk on XR, VR and AR. And I wanted an intro slide. And I said, I've got the themes, haven't you, within PowerPoint? And so I didn't quite like those. So I was like, okay, Copilot, can you generate a 1950s style sci-fi poster with reference to Dune on the integration of XI within libraries across the further education?
Yes.
And just came back with these fantastic, I tried the 60s, 70s and 80s. They got rubbish by then. But the 50s were particularly, you had rocket ships, and very robotic and holographic looking AI models, but that sort of stylized movie style poster. So that was quite quite fun. Yeah, it does those sort of themed or stylized things brilliantly. I've seen some really good video versions of that where, you know, they've taken a 1950s lens on Star Wars. So you get that kind of trailer for A New Hope as though it was filmed in the early 50s with the same sort of soundtrack and the robots and the starships. I thought that was a bit of fun.
I'll share one, but there's too many. But I'll share one. For me, I had it behave as different roles in a debate. So when you try and, for example, look at politics, that's a very common topic at the moment. If you want to talk about proportional representation or first past the post, I had it create a quick revision sheet on both positions and then behave as in different roles. And believe it or not, the stereotypical approach that it took, I asked it to behave as an established politician or a student, and it would take the stereotypical one. And you could create such simple breakdowns of points of view that you could share with learners or for yourself if you want to learn about it more, etc. I had to learn about it in my citizenship test. I am a citizen these days, in case anyone is wondering.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much for that. Yes, I've learned about the Magna Carta and fish and chips, as if I didn't know about that one. So using this as the worst pivot ever, we are all involved in the same collaborative project. We've been collaborating for the last, how many years now?
3
3 years. With colleagues from Cardiff and Vale, I know. Time really flies. So this year, our project has taken an AI detour as well. So I thought it would be really cool to talk about it here. And I know you guys are leads from Coleg Gwent on it. So I thought, what better way to have you explain what the project is, kind of where we are and what detour it took and what we're hoping to achieve. And then maybe we could provide where we each are in terms of our little piece of the puzzle, what we started doing.
Yeah, great. Yeah, well, first of all, I'd just like to note how great it's been to be able to collaborate with you guys in Cardiff and Vale as well. I know Stevie in Cardiff and Vale can't be here today, but yeah, it's been fantastic. We started off a couple of years ago looking at blended learning approaches, inclusive blended learning during the pandemic. It's amazing to think how far things have come since then, so true, and how exciting it is. But just in the last academic year, we were working with you on your Decode learning design project.
Yes.
And really this academic year is a development of that. Our collaborative project is looking at learning design and how we can look at specific examples of blended learning within learning design and how we can generate some case studies across the colleges to give people across Wales and across the UK something to look at in terms of different approaches to learning design and how to incorporate blended and sometimes when not to incorporate blended into their design. But as a sort of an infusion of AI into that, if you like, we're looking at ways that we can use artificial intelligence to generate prompts that will help our teaching staff develop effective approaches to blended learning, how they can infuse blended learning into their approaches, if that makes sense, using prompt frameworks. So we're looking at encouraging our staff to evaluate artificial intelligence and to create their own AI prompts. And we're going to bring all of those together at the end of the academic year as a kind of a reference to staff. It won't be an exhaustive encyclopedia, but it will be, we hope, a lovely stimulus for conversation for staff to get them thinking about AI prompts.
Yeah.
And that's what we're hoping to do. And as well as that, as a sideline, we're looking at using AI and developing an AI bot that will help our staff along the way with sort of blended learning design ideas.
That's cool. So that would be the GPT plus type of bot you would be thinking.
Yeah, that's what we're looking into at the moment. We started off with this idea of working with University College of London on a so this ABC framework. Not to confuse people with all these acronyms, but we immediately saw in the age of AI how dated that was, and how it was a bot, how a simple prompt machine would really help us perhaps and help staff more immediately with helping them plan for their effective blended learning. Yeah,
nice. So where is everyone with this? What are we doing for this this project?
Well, I think in terms of the context of my role and the project this year, unfortunately, I take a little bit of a sort of back step. But what I've been keen to do is the other staff that work within the TEL department and the engagements they've been having with colleagues across the college was really trying to collate and inform and stimulate some of those sort of case studies, some of those sort of vignettes of activities. So, taking the framework that you provided to us and ensuring that staff then are starting to collate their activity into those. So I know we've passed one over, but hopefully a couple more will be coming very shortly. But I'd say I think for me, it was about giving staff those examples of that blended approach and then looking at when that was meaningful as we looked at within Decode and when it was appropriate. As we've looked at other activities, and I know we're talking technology and using technology today, but sometimes when a flip chart and a post-it note and as a thought-provoking activity is the right thing in that context and can still stimulate learning. So I think that's the sort of key thing.
I really love this take because talking with some other colleagues, it seems like because it's not the flavor of the month, blending or hybridizing your learning experience as you would envisage it for your learners, it's almost like it's a passé thing to talk about. But in the age of generative AI, I don't think it's been more relevant in terms of finding where those limits are in between the physical, the digital, the here, the later, and finding ways in which you can plan for that, not just on the fly, but really plan for it and think of that narrative of learning to happen. I think it's as relevant as it's ever been, to be honest with you. And thinking in terms of accessibility along the way to bring that into it, again, it gives it extra dimensions. And sometimes I think it complicates things, but sometimes you kind of need to complicate things to simplify them, if that makes sense, so people get a clear idea of what they should be doing. So I love that. We're going to take the approach with Copilot in 365 rather than GPT Plus to create some prompts, but not a separate bot, because that is a different thing for us. But try and see how we would work within different apps within the 365 ecosystem and see what results we get. So I'm going to try and put that in layers, if that makes sense, to see what response you get here. Similar prompt, if not the same, in another one, just so we can almost try and test that for people before they would get to try it to see if it's worth doing it or not.
Almost like a blueprint then, but before you put it out.
Hopefully.
Yeah. I think similarly, what we talked about earlier on in the conversation, and it's not quite that teacher-matic approach, but giving staff that scaffolding and the sort of prompt structure to begin with to start that conversation, because I think the risk is maybe if we don't in that context, and it simply is drop downs. Well, staff, are they going to develop that thought process to be able to assist learners to develop that thought process? So giving them the prompts to begin with, fantastic, and the understanding that they then need to develop that skill. On a personal note, something quite interesting started happening recently is where I've almost started prompting myself. So rather than say getting Copilot to create the PowerPoint, I kind of know what I want to do, and I've sort of written the little prompts into the slides and then come back to them later and started to fill that in with that information. But a skill, again, maybe out of this project that either staff then start to develop, or a skill that learners can then start to develop in terms of, at the moment they might put their essay in or their assignment in and get Copilot or GPT to evaluate it. What have they missed? But in the hope that they'll start to develop that questioning style and prompting themselves and start thinking those questions and spotting those gaps themselves. It'd be interesting to see whether the prompting leads from the project in that context.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Well, from a Coleg Gwent perspective, if I go back to the case studies, these little vignettes, basically we want them just to celebrate the everyday blended stuff that's going on, and that to capture some of that, because our staff, they're cracking on with this stuff. I think it's just become an expectation, as you say. It's, it's just the norm now. Hey, but just capturing that everyday use of it and celebrating it. So we have 2 members of staff who are working with us 1 day a week, and they're going out there capturing some of these case studies and writing them.
Awesome.
They will probably use a bit of ChatGPT to help them. But why not?
Yeah, exactly.
Given the theme of it. And we're going to look at those, and we're going to look at those in terms of the Decode framework. So that's the framing for it. So when are they acquiring knowledge? When are they using something to practice?
Yeah.
So we're just going to frame it as little vignettes in that way. So we're excited about that. And they're off doing that work at the moment. Fingers crossed. I've seen 1 or 2 of them already. That's great. And it's a continuation of the stuff we've been doing, trying to celebrate good practice over the last couple of years. In terms of the AI and developing these prompts, we've been doing a series of sort of prompt, I guess, training sessions based on PowerPoint, not PowerPoint, but based on a Canva presentation, part generated by AI. And we've been having that conversation with staff about prompts and showing them the different kinds of prompt frameworks with a short practical session then where they generate the prompts themselves. And if they've got any juicy ones, any good ones, that they share them with their colleagues in their school and that they share them with us as well. And we're hoping to collate a library of those. And we're going to have a big hit on that right at the end of term on the 2nd and the 4th of July, where we're hitting all staff. And we'll have a lot of, a great deal of mini prompts to look through on that day.
Yeah.
But we're hoping that the ones that are shared, we'll be able to siphon through those and contribute towards this sort of library of best practice. But with that, we don't want that to become an encyclopedia of every prompt for everything.
Yeah.
The idea is we're just showing examples of the kind of thing you could
Yes. Yeah.
Teaching people to fish
rather
than giving them the fish. You know what I mean? So that's the idea behind it. So yeah, it's all sort of aiming towards this crescendo at the end of the academic year, and we're going to roll our sleeves up next week and have a go bash at the creating our bot. So we're very excited for it.
Nice.
Yes.
I'm excited. I still come to this event as well.
What do you?
Come along. Everyone's welcome.
Might have some things to do here. Cut that out. Cool. Well, thank you so much for taking part of this. We're kind of at the end of it, and it looks like food is coming out, which I'm very excited about. Students and staff have been working hard to create some food for us. So thank you for taking part of this. We're hoping you'll be just the first episode of many, and hopefully we'll come back soon and revisit some of this.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure.
That's fun. Thank you very much for the opportunity. It's been really enjoyable. Thank you.
Thank you very much.